All right, welcome to the Saving Stormwater podcast. This episode is brought to you by ComplianceGO, a cloud based software inspection platform for stormwater professionals aimed at solving every minimum control measure of the NPDES permit. Today, I'm pleased to be joined with Suzie Housley. Suzie, am I saying that right?
Yep, that's it.
Awesome. So, we kind of like to give people an opportunity in the beginning of our podcast to describe their job and how they're saving stormwater.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I am the stormwater scientist for Stormsensor, which is a stormwater tech company. And my background is as a government scientist and as an academic researcher. So I've collected a lot of experiences along the way, mostly doing things like setting up monitoring plans to determine if and how stormwater control projects are working. And a lot of my experiences made me ask, why do we have to do it this way? Isn't there something else out there, something else we can try? So working for Storm Sensor is really amazing, and I really do feel like I'm helping to save stormwater because I'm right here on the ground floor working with our team to invent monitoring tools that make it easier to track and account for stormwater flowing through systems. Lots of tools that I really wish I had had access to when I was out there working in the field.
Absolutely. And you know what? That's right on track with today's theme. Today we're actually going to be reacting to an article called "Flooding Caused by Old Data." The kind of the theme of today's podcast is the value of data. So just a quick summary for our listeners. We'll have this linked in our video as well. But the article talks about how lack of data is contributing to decision making in stormwater. Um, kind of a few specifics here. There's a PhD student at CMU who was looking at DOT manuals across the continental 48 and found that there's just a lot of old information that's kind of out of date and doesn't really account for significant range changes. I think the exact statistic was higher than 90% of the study area was based on old data. So, the reason we wanted to have Suzie on for the podcast today is because she works specifically in data. Suzie, what do you think about the lack of data in the United States when it comes to stormwater?
Yeah, it makes me sad and a little bit frustrated, to be honest. We're moving at such a fast pace to make the cities and everything we use, quote unquote, smarter. And the stormwater industry does seem to be lagging behind. And with the advent of climate change, I can say it's definitely starting to cost us. We're seeing increasing in flooding, like you mentioned. Our drainage systems are out of date. Um, and it's important to note that a lot of the projects, the infrastructure projects that municipalities take on to control these issues are some of the most expensive undertakings that they have. And sadly, we really don't have a lot of data to show how those investments are paying off. And yet we keep moving forward. So, and that's not to say we're not making any progress at all. We are, but I definitely think we can do better.
Oh, absolutely. I'm right there with you. One thing that the article kind of touched on but didn't really elaborate is just kind of some of the risks that stormwater professionals take with inaccurate data. Do you think you could speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. One quote that we're always tossing around at Storm Sensor is that if you can't measure something, then you can't manage it. So, that really ties into the stormwater world because most, if not all of the work we're doing is managing stormwater. So if we don't have accurate data, we're risking spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on projects and basic infrastructure that aren't correctly sized or placed. And furthermore, if we're not collecting post-construction data, we might not even know that they're not correctly sized or placed until we have a critical issue like flooding or infrastructure collapse, even in some cases. And also, even from the most basic regulatory standpoint, if you're looking to do anything other than just check the boxes on your reports for NPDES, TMDLs, or CSO long-term control plans, you really want to have a quantitative knowledge of what's flowing through your system and how your controls are working. You really can't control something if you don't know what's there.
Absolutely, that's a great statement there. So for somebody who doesn't work in stormwater, a lot of viewers that come to the Stormwater podcast, the Saving Stormwater podcast, sometimes they're new to the job. They're not necessarily sure what outdated data does to affect their citizens' day-to-day lives. What would you say are some of the ways that an average citizen can see the impact of outdated data?
Great. I love this question. People love to hate on stormwater, especially when, fees are involved. But the truth is that it really affects us every day. All of the infrastructure that we rely on for our day-to-day lives is based on data. For example, to tie back into that article we were talking about at the beginning, the typical drainage system is designed to control water from what engineers call a 25-year storm, which is a storm that has a statistical probability of occurring once every 25 years. Well, if you run those statistics on outdated data, then you're going to have an undersized drainage system that's going to lead to increased flooding. And we're already seeing that happening all over the country. So we have increased flooding. That affects you on a daily basis. You see it's going to cause traffic problems and public health concerns and increased exposure to pollutants.
Absolutely. So we were actually talking before the podcast, and I promise we'll kind of circle back around, but the American Society of Civil Engineers are going to be including stormwater in their 2021 report card. What do you think this is going to do in terms of affecting our stormwater community?
Yeah, I think this is an awesome move in the right direction. Part of the reason stormwater infrastructure doesn't get the prioritization and funding it deserves is because it's often overlooked. So historically, stormwater has been mentioned in the ASCE report as a subsection of wastewater. So having this stormwater called out separately is going to do a lot to get it the attention it deserves. And it might sound like I'm doing a commercial for ASCE right now, but the report card is like a wonderful resource. It's easy to understand. It has maps and visuals that are, accessible enough even for teachers to use in their classroom. So having a section specifically dedicated to stormwater is going to go a long way to bring the topic to the attention of the general public as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this is kind of a little off to the side here, but bringing public attention to stormwater is actually something that every city is kind of required to do. And if they have an outside organization that's willing to help them out with that, it's just kind of killing two birds with one stone. But anyway, that's just kind of my tidbit there. The next question that I had for you is, so since both of us are kind of working in that smart cities, I know you kind of mentioned smart cities earlier. What do you think has been one of the biggest advantages to cities that have adopted that smart model?
Yeah, in a general sense, I would say enhanced customer service, which might sound funny talking about municipalities, but um, municipalities often view their residents as their customers, and they're working hard every day to keep them happy. And smart technology makes that a lot easier. And where we are right now, I'd say that is in a lot of ways residents might not notice up front because, let's be honest, we don't always notice the second something gets easier, but we definitely noticed when something is not working. So cities on that smart model,
Mm-hmm.
they might have traffic cameras that are working to time lights and move everybody more efficiently throughout the day, or smart sewers that can text a maintenance crew that can come deal with a potential clog before sewage starts spewing out of a manhole and causing
Sure.
problems for everyone.
Sure.
So we have residents and city employees being able to flow through their day less encumbered by annoyances and hazards that used to be sort of everyday occurrences we just had to put up with.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a good way of putting it. So in the era, excuse me, of social media and mass tech integration, what do you think is the next step for those smart cities?
Yeah, well, that's a really big question. So to focus just on the water industry, I love that you mentioned social media because I really see the next phase of the movement being more human-centric. As I mentioned before, a lot of the current movement takes place, behind the scenes, taking away, those problems that you used to experience, just streamlining your life a little bit. But I see smart technologies starting to become a little bit more decentralized in the future in a way that empowers citizens to have access to insightful data and technology that they can use to be more water smart themselves instead of only relying on cities to do it. For example, we're starting to see smart apartment buildings now that have rainwater reuse plumbed in for non-potable needs that allow residents to track storage and use that water for their daily needs,
Hmm.
which can save them money and also allow them to take on an active role in making their city more sustainable.
Absolutely. So we're kind of getting towards the end of our podcast here, but I like to give all of our guests just kind of the final say, you know. So if you could leave our listeners with a single message, what would that message be?
I would say that data is not scary. I think there's this conception out there that data can be hard to get, hard to make sense of. And, the old line from high school test, no one told you there was going to be math involved. Or, there's others out there that have had that same trusty engineering handbook for years and they think it's got all the numbers they'll ever need to know. But the world is changing and having accurate data to make sound decisions on can actually make things much easier in the long run, and that there are lots of amazing tools out there to help.
Awesome. I couldn't agree more. Sometimes you just are dealing with some situations that aren't great just because you're dealing with old data. And I'm really glad that we had some time to just kind of run through some of the advantages of having newer data, making sure that everything is running smoothly. I really loved what you said about, people are kind of clients to a city, and we really need to take that seriously and make sure that we're doing everything we can to make their lives easier. So, but that concludes our Saving Stormwater podcast. I believe this is episode 6. I think it is episode 6. Thank you to all of our listeners. Thank you so much, Suzie. This was a phenomenal podcast. Make sure to, oh, yeah. Make sure to follow us on our social media platforms. You can just follow us at StormwaterGO. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We're also on YouTube. That's where we'll be posting this. And we're really excited to kind of get the word out. Thanks so much, Suzie. I appreciate having you on.
Great, thank you.